Buried in the sealed vault beneath Oakhaven Castle rests a truth the werewolf aristocracy tried to bleed from every record. A human girl, ridiculed, discarded during the sacred Alpha trials, carried something in her blood that shattered an entire power structure. Her name was Isabel. When she collapsed upon the sacred stones, her tormentors howled with laughter. That laughter choked silent the instant the ground split apart, and the ancient king beneath it opened his eyes. Winter had descended early on Oakhaven. A vicious frost crawled through the sprawling stone fortress, gnawing into bone. At the core of this stronghold thrived the Croftback, a Lycan bloodline built on savage strength and absolute dominance. Their leader was Silas Croft. His ambition rivaled only his brutality. He had seized power through manipulation and terror, governing the northern territories with a merciless grip. And moving among these towering Lycans, nearly invisible beneath their arrogance, walked Isabel Sterling, human, fragile, a lamb threading through apex predators. The Sterlings had served Oakhaven's wolves for generations. Her father, William Sterling, had been the pack's archivist and healer, respected for his brilliance, pitied for his lack of a wolf. When a mysterious fever claimed him, Isabel inherited nothing but solitude. An orphan chained to a pack that saw her as cheap labor, a breathing target for their entertainment. Her existence was a grinding loop of exhaustion and quiet degradation. She scoured the great hall's stone floors until her knees went purple and her fingertips cracked. She fed the enormous hearths, dragging timber that nearly matched her own weight, all beneath the sneers and hissed contempt of pack members. Lady Beatrice of Cornwall savored the torment most. A high-ranking noblewoman with fur pale as moonlight and a soul colder than the frost outside. Beatrice would coo, kicking over a bucket of filthy water Isabel had just finished wringing. Isabel only bit the inside of her cheek, the metallic taste of her own restraint. Then she started the work again. She'd learned years ago, reaction was fuel. The wolves fed on submission, they gorged on fear. But underneath that bowed posture, something burned. Quiet, steady. Isabel was a survivor. Her mind was razor-sharp, mapping the pack's tangled politics with surgical precision. She catalogued every grudge Garrick of the Pine Ridge nursed against the current leadership. She tracked the secret alliances coiling through the castle's darker corridors. She knew everything, because no one guards their tongue around the help. As the decade turned, Oakhaven's atmosphere shifted, oppressive weight giving way to crackling voltage. The Alpha Trials had come, a savage ancient tradition held once per generation. The strongest wolves threw themselves through lethal challenges to prove their dominance and potentially unseat the reigning leader. Silas, hungry to cement his rule and silence every whisper of doubt, declared this cycle's trials the most punishing Oakhaven had ever witnessed. Lycans poured in from neighboring territories. Massive frames wrapped in thick pelts and scarred leather. The air thickened with aggression, musk, and the raw promise of bloodshed. Isabel worked double shifts without pause, roasting stag and boar for feasts, pouring ale until her shoulders screamed, patching the wounds wolves carved into each other during drunken brawls. One such chaotic evening in the Great Hall, Silas called for silence. He rose on the dais. Dark eyes swept the crowd like a blade. That gaze, predatory, deliberate, found Isabel. She was pressed against the shadows near the kitchens, trying to disappear. "Our ancestors forged this pact through strength," Silas bellowed, his voice crashing against the vaulted ceilings. "But they built it equally on the submission of the weak. Tomorrow, the final phase of the trial begins in the ancient arena. And to remind every soul here of the natural order, our little human pet will have the honor of serving as quarry for the opening event." A gasp tore through the hall. Then came the laughter, cruel, rolling, hungry. Isabel's heart dropped like a stone into her stomach. The quarry. She knew that word. Her father's old text had burned it into her memory. The quarry was bait, a creature released into the arena to be chased, torn at, toyed with, all before the real combat even started. It wasn't a role, it was a death sentence dressed in sport. Quote 4, quote. The voice belonged to Aldous, an older wolf who stepped forward on unsteady legs. Silas snapped, his eyes flared with dangerous golden light. Isabel stood frozen. The laughter of 100 wolves pressed against her skull like a vice. Her fingers curled around a small silver pendant hidden beneath the coarse fabric of her tunic. An ancient heirloom. Her father had pressed it into her palm on his deathbed. Underscore underscore. Quote underscore 8 underscore underscore. He had whispered, each breath rattling through his ruined lungs. Quote 9. She had never understood those delirious final words, but standing there, staring into the glowing, merciless eyes of Silas Croft, she understood something else. Tomorrow, she would likely die without ever learning the truth. Dawn split across the northern peaks. Crimson bled into bruised purple over the snow-capped mountains. The ancient arena of Oakhaven, a massive circular pit carved straight into the bedrock by Lycan ancestors, was already overflowing. Stone bleachers groaned under the weight of howling spectators. Their collective breath rose in thick white plumes against the freezing morning air. At the pit's center lay the Moonstone Crest, a vast circular slab of obsidian etched with forgotten runes, the site where the first Lycan pacts were supposedly sealed. Isabel was shoved down a dark, damp tunnel toward the arena floor. She wore nothing but a thin linen tunic and breeches, no armor, no warmth, no defense against the cold or the claws waiting for her. Her bare feet slapped against frozen stone. Behind her, 2 burly guards snickered. Rough hands drove her forward toward the blinding white light ahead. "Move, little meat," one of them sneered. "The Alpha's waiting." She stumbled out into the open, and the roar hit her like a fist. Hundreds of wolves jeered from every direction. Scraps of food sailed through the air. Hardened snowballs cracked against the grout near her feet. High above, Silas lounged in an ornate wooden chair draped in bear pelts. Supreme satisfaction carved into every line of his face. Lady Beatrice perched beside him, sipping hot wine, studying Isabel the way one studies a rat already caught in a trap. Silas rose, one hand lifted. Silence crashed down instantly. The absolute, unquestioning obedience of the pack. That was its own kind of horror. The final day of the Alpha trial begins. Silas's voice boomed, amplified by the ancient acoustics of the pit. Underscore underscore, quote underscore, 13 underscore underscore. His leather-gloved finger extended, pointed directly at Isabel. Underscore underscore, quote underscore, 14 underscore underscore. Isabel's gaze dragged toward the arena's center. There, resting on the smooth black surface of the Moonstone Crest, a heavy silver goblet. 50 yards away, maybe less, it should have seemed close, but from the opposite tunnel came a sound that turned her blood to ice. 3 massive gates grinding open. From the darkness, 3 formidable challengers emerged, already shifted into their half-wolf forms, hulking monstrosities of muscle, fur, and lethal intent. Among them stood Garrick. His gray fur bristled with raw aggression. All 3 dropped to all fours. 6 yellow eyes locked onto Isabel. They weren't going to rush. They intended to savor it, watch her flee, drink in her screams, breathe the raw stink of her terror. "Begin," Silas commanded. The word left his lips soft as silk, yet it reached every corner of the arena. Isabel bolted. Years of cruelty had sharpened one thing inside her to a razor's edge, the instinct to survive. It swallowed her fear whole, and she ran. Frozen air scorched her lungs. Her bare feet skidded across frosted stone. She drove herself harder than she'd ever moved in her life. Behind her, the sickening rhythm of heavy paws striking earth. They were coming. Deliberately slow, letting her taste the center of the ring before they snapped the trap shut. The crowd bayed with delight. Wagers flew on which wolf would taste first blood. Isabel reached the rim of the moonstone crest. The obsidian radiated an unnatural warmth against her freezing soles. She threw herself forward. Her fingers closed around the cold silver of the chalice of winter. A wild, fragile ember of hope flared in her chest. She spun toward the dais where Silas sat. Garrick was already there. The enormous grey wolf had vaulted clean over her, slamming onto the obsidian with a force that shuddered through the ground. He loomed above her, fangs bared, saliva threading down in long, glistening ropes. Isabel stumbled backward, pressing the chalice tight against her ribs. The other two wolves had circled wide. She was boxed in, standing dead center on the ancient runes. "Did you really think he would let you in, little mouse?" Garrick's voice scraped out of a throat never built for human words. Guttural, wrong, terrible. High in the stands, Beatrice's laughter rang out sharp as glass. "Tear her apart, Garrick! End this farce!" Isabel's spine met the heart of the obsidian slab. Her fingers found a silver pendant beneath her shirt. She closed her eyes. She prayed her father waited on the other side. Garrick lunged. Isabel threw her arm up, a desperate, useless shield. Massive claws raked downward, shredding linen, carving deep into her forearm. Pain detonated, white-hot, blinding. She screamed. The chalice slipped from her grip as the impact hurled her sideways. She struck the ground hard, landing directly over the central rune etched into the moonstone. Blood, vivid crimson, poured from the gashes, pooling across black stone. Garrick advanced for the killing bite, his jaws yawned wide. But something changed. Where Isabel's blood touched the ancient dust-choked grooves, it didn't simply gather, it moved. A faint crimson pulse lit the carved lines, racing through the intricate pattern with impossible speed. Garrick locked mid-stride, every instinct howling. The scent shifted in an instant. The sharp copper of Isabel's wound vanished, drowned beneath something else entirely. Something ancient. Something so staggeringly dominant that all three wolves in the ring tucked their tails and cowered. Deep earth, ozone. A predatory authority that reduced Silas's aura to that of a newborn pup. Silas roared from his high seat, knuckles bone white on the armrests. Garrick couldn't move. Crimson light blazed from Isabel's blood, flooding the arena in blinding radiance. The temperature in the pit collapsed, breath crystallized in every throat. Then came a sound, low, resonant, final. Solid stone, cracking open. The moonstone crest was splitting apart. Oak Haven shook to its foundations. Up in the stands, chaos erupted. Stone bleachers bucked and shuddered, hurling spectators to the ground. Silas vaulted from his seat, rage warring with something he hadn't felt in years. Raw animal terror. Beatrice's smugness had evaporated completely. She clung to the wooden railing with both hands, knuckles bloodless. In the arena's heart, the massive obsidian slab fractured with a sound like the world breaking. The three challenger wolves whimpered, enormous, deadly creatures reduced to trembling shapes pressed flat against the earth in absolute submission. Isabel clutched her torn arm and scrambled backward off the splitting stone. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a caged bird. From the widening fissure, a brilliant silver light, ethereal, alive, surged upward, slicing clean through the gray morning sky. The earth split open with a deep, agonized moan, revealing a subterranean crypt entombed beneath the arena for centuries. Air pressure plummeted so fast that eardrums cracked. The raw scent of petrichor and ancient, undiluted power rolled across the crowd like a tide. From the broken depths, a figure rose, not scrambling, not climbing, ascending, as though the darkness itself carried him upward on its shoulders. His boots met the shattered surface of the arena, and silence swallowed everything. Thousands of lichens stood frozen. The wind itself went still. He was a man, though that word felt grotesquely insufficient. Devastatingly tall, shoulders broad enough to blot out torchlight, draped in the rotting remnants of dark velvet and corroded silver plate.
His hair fell in wild black waves, raven dark, framing a face built from brutal, merciless angles. But his eyes seized every last breath from Isabel's chest. Luminescent silver, burning with a primordial rage that had been festering in total darkness for hundreds of years. This was Alistair Draven, a name scraped from every tapestry, a ghost story whispered to frighten disobedient pups into silence. The true king of the northern reaches, the first alpha whose bloodline the treacherous Croft ancestors believed they had annihilated. They were wrong. He had not been killed. He had been sealed beneath the earth by dark magic, cursed into a living death. A slumber that could only be broken when the blood of his sworn human wardens, the Sterlings, set him free. Alistair drew a long, slow breath. His massive chest expanded, drinking in the air of a world that had forgotten him. Those silver eyes swept across the wolves cowering on the ground before him. They didn't pause. They found Isabel instantly. He smelled her, the iron bite of her open wound, the terror hammering through her racing pulse. And beneath all of it, ancient, unmistakable, the scent of the pact. She was a Sterling, a descendant of the very bloodline sworn to guard his secrets. And she was bleeding. A growl rolled from somewhere deep inside Alistair's chest. Low, bottomless, so fundamentally dominant that several wolves in the stands forcibly snapped back into human form, their bodies physically incapable of holding the beast under the crushing weight of a true king's presence. Who has done this? His voice ground like stone against stone. Dark, resonant, reaching every corner of the arena without effort. No one breathed a word. Garrick, the wolf who had slashed Isabel, lay pressed flat against the rubble, whining like a kicked dog. Alistair's gaze locked onto him. No wasted motion. The ancient king closed the distance in 3 strides. He did not shift. He did not need to. He simply reached down, seized the massive grey lichen by the scruff of his neck, and launched him across the arena like a rag. Garrick struck the far stone wall with a wet, sickening crunch, then slid to the ground, unconscious. That single display of effortless, terrifying power shattered the spell. Chaos detonated through the stands. Quote _21, __. Silas's voice came out shrill, cracking. He jabbed the trembling finger toward the figure in the pit. Kill him! He is an intruder, an abomination! Tear him apart! 12 armored guards, loyal to Silas alone, vaulted from the ledges. They shifted mid-fall, hitting the ground as enormous wolves, a wall of fur, fangs, and killing intent. They charged from every direction at once. Alistair did not flinch. He turned his back on all 12 of them and walked, calmly, deliberately, toward Isabel. The first guard lunged for his spine. Alistair flicked his wrist. A shockwave of raw kinetic force detonated outward, catching every guard at once. 12 massive wolves flew backward like leaves in a hurricane. They struck the earth hard. Not one of them stood again. He knelt before her. Up close, he was something out of a forgotten age. Terrifyingly beautiful, savage, regal. His jaw tightened as his gaze fell to her bleeding arm. With hands powerful enough to shatter stone, he cradled her wounded limb. His touch burned warm against her skin. You carry the mark of the Sterling line, Alistair said, his voice low, silver eyes holding her wide, terrified gaze. And your blood falls upon my seal. Tell me, little bird, for what crime were you thrown to these mutts? For their amusement.
Isabel stammered. Her body shook. From the cold, the blood draining out of her, the impossible nearness of this ancient being. She couldn't tell which. Alistair corrected. His voice was firm, but threaded with an unexpected gentleness. He rose to his full height, his massive frame a wall between Isabel and every prying eye in that arena. His head tilted back. His gaze found the high seat where Silas sat, barking frantic orders at a pack too terrified to move. __, quote _ 29 __. Alistair's voice shed its quiet restraint. The words crashed through Oak Haven like thunder, shaking the stone beneath their feet. You wear the title of Alpha, yet you let mongrels feast on the innocent. You are a usurper, born of a treacherous bloodline. I am the Alpha of Oak Haven, Silas screamed, his face swollen purple with fury. I am Silas Croft, and you are a dead myth. Alistair smiled, slow, predatory. A curving of lips that sent eyes crawling down the spine of every creature watching. Then come down here, Silas Croft. He spread his arms wide. Step into the pit. Defend your stolen title. Or I will come up there and tear it from your throat. Every eye in the pack turned to Silas. The ultimate test of any alpha. A direct challenge. To refuse was to forfeit the right to rule. Silas stared down at the ancient nightmare that had just clawed its way out of the earth. The arrogant king who had terrorized these northern territories was suddenly, painfully aware of one truth. He was utterly outmatched. And beside Alistair, the human girl they had mocked as a weak, useless pet, now stood under the protection of the most dangerous creature to ever walk the silence blanketed the arena. Thick, suffocating. Thousands of eyes darted between the ancient horror standing in the shattered pit and the Alpha trembling on his high balcony.
Silas Croft, the ruthless tyrant who had crushed the northern territories beneath an iron fist, was paralyzed by a terror he had never tasted before. The pack's absolute law, carved into the ancient Wolf-Hartmann treatises, left no room for interpretation. A direct challenge for the Alpha seat within the sacred pit could not be refused. To decline was to be stripped of one's wolf, cast out as an omega, hunted down before sunset. I am waiting, usurper. Alistair Draven's voice sliced through the freezing air again. Calm, laced with something lethal underneath. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. His dominance was a physical weight, pressing down on the chest of every Lycan present. Silas swallowed hard. His face had gone pale as bone. He glanced toward Lady Beatrice, searching for some flicker of support. But the pale-haired noblewoman had already retreated several steps, her eyes wide with cold, self-preserving calculation. The pack was watching. The neighboring alphas who had traveled to observe the trials, they were watching too. If Silas backed down now, his own lieutenants would tear him apart before he reached the castle gates. A roar erupted from his chest, half fury, half desperation. Silas vaulted over the wooden railing. He shifted in midair, bone cracked, fabric shredded. By the time his feet struck the stone floor of the arena, he was a monstrous pitch-black werewolf. Nearly 8 feet tall on his hind legs, saliva dripping from massive jaws, eyes burning with the chaotic aggression of a cornered animal. Isabel gasped. She clutched her bleeding arm and scrambled backward until her spine pressed against the crumbling remnants of the moonstone crest. Silas, in his wolf form, was a terror she had only witnessed from a distance, a beast that had ripped apart entire insurgent packs in the eastern valleys. Alistair did not shift. He rolled his broad shoulders. Tarnished silver armor clinked softly against the velvet tunic beneath. He regarded the massive black beast with a look that sat somewhere between boredom and profound disgust. You reek of fear, boy. His murmur was quiet, but the acoustics of the pit delivered every syllable to every eager ear. You rely on size to disguise your weakness. Come then, show me what a modern alpha is capable of. Silas lunged. He closed the distance in a heartbeat. Massive claws swept horizontal, an attack designed to take the ancient king's head clean off his shoulders.
The crowd held its breath as one. Alistair moved with a speed that broke every physical law the world had ever known. He didn't just dodge, he dropped beneath that killing swipe and drove a raw, savage uppercut into the soft underside of Silas's jaw. Bone cracked like a pistol shot. Silas's enormous body lifted clean off the earth, jaws clamping shut so hard his own fangs splintered. The black wolf crashed onto his spine, skidding across frost-slicked stone. Before Silas could even think about rising, Alistair was already on him. The ancient king seized the beast by the thick scruff of his throat and wrenched him upward, driving him into the arena's merciless stone wall. Alistair's roar shook the air, silver eyes blazing with raw, uncontainable wrath. I read the Stirling-Draven Accords of 1342, a sacred oath of protection, and you turned my wardens into sport. Silas thrashed wildly, massive claws raking down Alistair's chest, shredding ancient velvet, scraping against tarnished silver plate beneath. Alistair didn't flinch. Pain meant nothing. Only the righteous fury of a king betrayed. Then Silas made his desperate, filthy move. His form shrank, reverting to human in an instant. A coward's trick to slip the chokehold. The moment he hit the ground, a hidden dagger flashed from his boot. The blade gleamed with that unmistakable killing sheen, refined liquid silver laced with wolfsbane. He thrust it upward, straight at Alistair's heart. Isabel's scream tore through the arena. The blade punched into his chest, burying deep in the muscle just beneath his collarbone. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Silver and wolfsbane together. An instant death sentence for any Lycan. Silas barked out a harsh, bloody laugh, gore streaming from his ruined jaw. __quote _41 ___, he spat, chest heaving. Alistair looked down at the silver dagger jutting from his body. Slowly, terribly, a dark smile carved across his face. His hand rose, fingers wrapped around the hilt. Without a single flinch, he ripped the blade free. The wound hissed for one brief second, then the flesh began knitting shut at impossible speed. Quote 42. A whisper, low and dark as a grave. Quote 43. Silas's eyes blew wide with pure, bottomless horror. He stumbled backward, his knees buckled. The full weight of his doom finally crushing him flat. Alistair didn't let him suffer in suspense. He stepped forward, one hand snapping out to grip the usurper's skull. A sharp, merciless twist. A single crack split the silence of the arena. Silas Croft's lifeless body crumpled onto the frozen ground. His reign of terror snuffed out in seconds. The quiet that followed was total. No cheers, no howls. Thousands of Lycans simply stared in stunned, terrified reverence at the man standing over the corpse of their invincible alpha. Alistair turned slowly, his silver gaze cutting across the bleachers. He found the eyes of Lycan lords, warriors, trembling nobility. His voice rang with absolute command. No one moved. Then, slowly, an old Lycan near the front row rose. Aldous, the wolf who had tried to shield Isabel earlier. He descended into the pit, stepping past blood and rubble without hesitation. 10 paces from Alistair, he dropped to his knees and bared his throat, the ultimate surrender. Aldo's voice came rough and broken. Like dominoes toppling, the rest of the arena followed. Thousands of Lycans sank to their knees, throats bared to the cold air. A wave of submission rolling through that ancient stone amphitheater. The reign of the Crofts finished. The era of the Draven King begun. The transfer of power was swift, absolute. Within the hour, banners bearing the Croft insignia were ripped from the battlements of Oakhaven Castle and hurled into the courtyard fires. Alistair Draven didn't march into the Great Hall like a conqueror. He strode in like an owner returning to a badly mismanaged estate. His presence demanded an immediate, profound shift in the pack's hierarchy. Those preening lords and vicious ladies, the ones who'd strutted through these halls just hours before, now shuffled with downcast eyes, terrified of provoking the ancient king's wrath. Isabel sat at the center of the Alpha's private study, a vast circular chamber lined with leather-bound volumes and tapestries chronicling forgotten Lycan conquests. She couldn't stop shivering. Someone had draped a heavy fur cloak over her shoulders, rich and luxurious.
The wound on her arm pulsed without mercy, a blade-sharp reminder of the morning's horror. The oak door groaned open. Alistair stepped through. The atmosphere thickened instantly, crackling with invisible charge. He'd shed the ruined armor and shredded velvet. Now he wore a plain dark linen shirt and riding leathers pulled from Silas's sprawling wardrobe. Without the grime and shadow of the crypt clinging to him, his features struck harder, severe, royal, brutally handsome. Behind him came Lady Beatrice. She was attempting a desperate, nauseating reinvention. A silver basin of warm water balanced in her hands, fresh bandages draped over her arm. Her pale hair was immaculate. Her dress loosened at the collar with calculated precision. She'd understood immediately. Survival meant attaching herself to the new power. "My king," Beatrice cooed, her voice glazed with false honey as she placed the basin on the table beside Isabel. "Allow me to tend to your servant, the least I can offer after the horrors Silas inflicted upon her." Alistair froze mid-step. He turned on Beatrice. Those silver eyes contracted into lethal slits. The stench of her deception poured off her skin, thick, suffocating, like perfume left to rot. "You call her a servant?" His voice rolled low through the floorboards. Beatrice blinked. That practiced smile cracked at the edges. "Well, yes, my lord. She is human. The Sterlings have always been the help." "The Sterlings are the wardens of Oakhaven," Alistair cut her short, taking one slow, predatory step toward the noblewoman. "The Archibald private letters of 1409 make it plain. The human wardens hold equal standing to the Alpha in matters of pack law. Isabel is not your servant, she is your superior." Every trace of color fled Beatrice's face. Alistair's confirmation landed like a stone dropped into still water. "And I carry the memories of the earth itself, Lady Beatrice. Every drop of blood spilled on these castle stones. I know it. I know it was you who kicked the water bucket across her hands. I know it was you who laughed when she was thrown into the pit." Beatrice stumbled backward. Her spine met the heavy wooden door. "My king, I was only following Silas's orders. We all were." "You relished it," Alistair corrected. His tone permitted no appeal. "Leave these chambers. You are banished from the upper levels of the keep. If I ever hear you address Isabel with anything less than absolute reverence, I will rip the tongue from your mouth and feed it to the hounds. Go!" A strangled sob tore from Beatrice's throat. She clawed the door open and fled, slamming it behind her. Silence settled again, but gentler now. Only the hearth fire popped and whispered. Alistair released a long breath. The steel drained from his posture as his gaze found Isabel. He moved toward her with deliberate slowness, no sudden shifts, no quick gestures, as if approaching a wounded doe. He lowered himself to his knees before her, just as he had in the arena, bringing his eyes level with hers. Carefully, he lifted her injured arm. The gash Garrick had torn was deep, ragged claw marks, raw and angry. Isabel whispered, her voice shook. These were her first words spoken directly to him since the pit. Alistair said gently, his silver eyes lifted to search her face. She studied this ancient, terrifying creature who had dismantled an entire regime in minutes. Yet when those eyes met hers, no cruelty lived there. Only a fierce, consuming protectiveness that set her pulse racing for reasons she couldn't name.
A small, uncertain nod. Alistair raised her bleeding arm to his lips. He did not bite. Instead, his tongue moved gently across the deep lacerations. Isabel's breath caught sharp. A bolt of heat surged through her arm, chased instantly by a wave of cool, soothing relief. Lichen saliva carried healing properties, but an alpha's touch was something else entirely. Isabel watched, breathless, as shredded skin wove itself whole beneath his lips. No scar, no mark, just smooth, perfect flesh where ruin had been.
He set her arm down gently, but he kept her hand. His thumb moved in slow circles across her knuckles. Your father. Alistair's voice dropped low, his gaze fixed on their intertwined fingers.
Quote 64, quote 65. Isabel's words came out thin as smoke. You call me a warden. I've read every text in that library. Wardens were glorified record keepers. A short, bitter laugh escaped Alistair's chest. Quote 67. Quote. His jaw tightened. Quote 68. Quote. His silver eyes lifted to hers, blazing with something ancient and untamed. Isabel's breath locked in her throat. A covenant. The Lichen texts name it the Anima Nexum, Alistair said. His voice had dropped a full octave, deep, reverberating through bone. A soul tie. You are not nearly the warden of Oakhaven, Isabel. My beast knew you the instant I tore free from the earth. A pause, heavy, deliberate. You are my mate, my queen. Those two words hung suspended, thick with fate and staggering consequence. Isabel.
The orphan human girl who had scrubbed stone floors on bleeding knees and survived on scraps. Now staring into the silver eyes of the true king, understanding with terrifying clarity that the arena had not been her ending, it had been her beginning, a prologue to war. Because a human queen on a Lichen throne would shake the foundations of every territory in the known world, and the neighboring alphas would never allow the Draven bloodline to rise unchallenged. Winter storms battered the walls of Oakhaven, but the deadliest storm was gathering inside the castle's great hall. Word of the resurrected ancient king tore through the northern valleys like wildfire. It reached the ears of rival Lichen lords before the sun had even finished setting on Silas's destruction. They did not come bearing gifts, they came bearing teeth. Within 3 days, banners from 4 rival territories stood planted in the snow-choked courtyard. The Council of Fangs had arrived, a coalition of alphas demanding an audience with the so-called myth who had seized Oakhaven. At the coalition's head stood Lord Cedric of the Ashencrag, a brute carved from violence, with fiery red hair and a reputation for skinning enemies while they still breathed. Cedric had hungered for Oakhaven's rich hunting grounds for years. This upheaval was his opening, his chance to devour. He strode into the great hall with 24 armed enforcers at his flanks. Their boots struck ancient stone in a grim, deliberate rhythm. What waited at the far end of that hall stopped them cold. Alistair Draven occupied the high seat, not sprawled like the arrogant Silas had been, but perfectly upright, still as death, radiating the suffocating calm of a predator who has never once needed to prove what he is. Dark ancestral leathers covered his frame, no jewels, no ornamentation, none required. And beside him, on a chair of equal height, sat Isabel. Not the bruised, ash-covered servant girl anymore. The castle seamstresses, half paralyzed by fear of Alistair's wrath, had labored without rest to dress her as the warden of Oakhaven deserved. A gown of deep midnight blue draped her frame, trimmed in silver thread that mirrored the ancient king's eyes. Silver clasps threaded through dark braids, her chin lifted, her gaze unflinching. Her heart hammered beneath her ribs. The old terrors still clawed at her edges. But she refused to drop her eyes as the hostile alphas mounted the steps toward the dais. So the ghost stories hold water after all. Lord Cedric's sneer cut through the silence. He stopped at the base of the steps, yellow eyes flicking from Alistair to Isabel.
his lip peeled back in open revulsion. Underscore underscore, quote, underscore, 75 underscore underscore. His gaze settled on her. Underscore underscore, quote, underscore, 76 underscore underscore. Alistair's jaw clenched, the muscles beneath his skin twitching like coiled wire. He leaned forward, elbows braced against his knees. The natural hierarchy, Cedric of the Ashen Crag, dictates that mongrels do not snarl at those above them. You stand in your king's hall. You are king of nothing, Cedric bellowed, his enforcer surging a step closer, palms already gripping silver-laced hilts. The old pacts are ash. The North answers to the strong, and I will not kneel before a walking ghost who shares his throne with a fragile, bleeding slab of meat. Surrender the territory and the girl. We might let you slink back into whatever grave spat you out. A collective gasp rippled through the Oakhaven wolves pressed against the walls. Eldus, the elder wolf who had pledged himself to Alistair in the arena, lunged forward with murder in his eyes. But Alistair lifted one hand. Eldus froze mid-stride. Alistair rose to his full height, slow and deliberate, his massive frame throwing a shadow so long it swallowed the visiting alphas whole. The air pressure in the chamber plummeted, so sudden, so violent, that several of Cedric's guards buckled, hands clawing at their chests. The silver rings in Alistair's irises blazed white-hot. You dare call the old pacts ash? His voice came low, subterranean, a seismic vibration that shuddered through the castle's bedrock. Underscore underscore, quote, underscore, 81 underscore underscore. He turned with fluid grace, extending one hand toward Isabel. Underscore underscore, quote, underscore, 82 underscore underscore. Isabel's heart slammed against her ribs. But the moment her gaze locked with Alistair's, a flood of calm washed through her. The anima nexum, their soul tie, pulsed warm behind her sternum. A steady drum. A heartbeat of borrowed courage that burned her human frailty to nothing. She remembered the hidden texts her father had drilled into her memory, the ancient runic laws that arrogant wolves had laughed off as fairy tales. She rose, ignoring Cedric's sneering glare, and placed her hand in Alistair's. Underscore underscore quote underscore 83 underscore underscore. Isabel's voice cut through the hall, steady, ringing, impossibly clear. You say the North belongs to the strong, but your strength is borrowed. The wards shielding the Ashen Crag, the enchanted streams that mend your wounded. Do you even know who threaded them into the soil? Cedric's eyes narrowed. A twitch of uncertainty cracked his brutish mask. Quote 85, quote 86. Isabel answered, cold as the frost outside. She descended the first 2 steps of the dais. Quote 87, quote. Isabel raised her uninjured arm, palm turned outward toward the towering stone pillars. Quote 88. Her eyes fell shut. She reached for the deep, framing energy that had lived inside her ever since her blood kissed the moonstone crest. A single word tore from her throat. Guttural, ancient, older than human memory. A word her father had breathed with his dying gasp. The response was immediate. Beneath the subterranean foundations of Oakhaven, sound gathered like a living thing. Not a tremor, a groan. Vast, resonant, primordial. As though the ancient earth itself was dragging open its eyes after centuries of dreamless sleep. That single guttural syllable hung in the frozen air, vibrating at a frequency that made every lichened jaw ache down to the root. Then the wards ignited. Magical sigils, carved into the fortress's foundation, blazed to life. Carvings that generations of wolves had dismissed as decorative stonework. Blinding silver light erupted from every crack, racing up the pillars, stitching itself across the vaulted ceiling in a web of liquid lightning. The power refused to stay contained. It surged outward like a detonation. Ethereal force ripped across the snow-buried courtyards, punched through the howling northern winds, and struck the jagged peaks of the ashen crag with invisible, cataclysmic precision. Lord Cedric choked, his yellow eyes blew wide, sudden, screaming agony flooding every nerve. He staggered backward, heavy boots skidding on stone. A wet, tearing sensation ripped through his chest. Not the physical fracture of bone, but the savage rupture of something far deeper. That spiritual tether binding Cedric to his territory, the ancient magical cord that fed him every ounce of his alpha dominance, was ripped away in one violent stroke. Around him, 24 enforcers hit the ground at once. Silver-laced swords clattered from their grip.
Hands flew to throats as forced transformations reversed with brutal speed.
Thick fur dissolved into pale, naked skin. Elongated claws splintered and shrank back into ordinary fingernails. Supernatural strength, gone, evaporated like breath in winter air. In seconds, the most feared strike force across the northern valleys became a heap of shivering, sobbing, powerless men on cold stone. What sorcery is this? Cedric rasped. His monstrous presence had shattered like glass. He stared at his own hands, trembling, entirely human. The truth crept through him, slow as poison. The beast inside had been caged, buried beneath the crushing weight of an ancient curse. There is no sorcery here, and nothing dark. Isabel's voice rang through the hall, layered with the thundering resonance of every ancestor whose blood ran through her veins. Silver light from the awakened wards wrapped her like armor, transforming the fragile human into something terrifying, something divine. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Every word fell with the force of absolute law. I have sealed the ley lines beneath your territory. Your lands are barren now. Enchanted streams will thicken into stagnant mud. Your wolves will bleed from wounds that no longer close. Winter crops will blacken and rot in frozen soil. You mocked the hand that sustained your bloodline for centuries, Lord Cedric. You spat on the very source of your existence. A pause, heavy, final. Now you and your pack will starve in the dark. Terror swept through the visiting alphas like wildfire. They had marched into Oak Haven, expecting to corner a disoriented king and butcher his helpless human pet. Instead, they stood trapped inside a fortress alive with primordial magic, ancient, apocalyptic, beyond anything they could fight or comprehend. Apex predators, reduced to trespassers in a god's domain. Quote _93, Lord Harland of the River Pack screamed, arrogance shattering in a single breath. His knees cracked against freezing stone. Forehead pressed to the floor. Neck bared in raw, desperate submission. Quote _94, One by one, like falling stones, the remaining alphas and their guards crashed to the floor beside him. Total subjugation. The great hall filled with the whimpering of grown, monstrous men pleading for their lives. Only Cedric still stood, chest heaving, body trembling with a poisonous cocktail of ruin, fury, and cornered animal terror. His gaze found Alistair, and what he saw there broke something final inside him. The true king was not watching Cedric at all. He was watching Isabel, and his expression held no surprise, only profound pride, only burning, undisguised devotion. Cedric's mind cracked. Stripped of wolf, lance, and dignity, he became exactly what he'd always been beneath the power, a rabid thing with nothing left. A guttural scream ripped from his throat, shredding vocal cords. His hand found the hidden silver dagger at his belt. Poisoned blade. He lunged for the days, desperate to bury it in Isabel's heart, to drag the warden into death alongside him. He never made it past the first step. Alistair did not shift. He did not need the beast to deal with a broken man. He simply moved, a towering wall of muscle and ancient wrath, placing himself between Cedric and his queen. One massive hand shot forward. Fingers closed around Cedric's thick throat, lifted him clean off the floor, effortless. Cedric gagged, legs thrashing uselessly in empty air. The silver dagger slipped from his grip, clattering down the stone steps. Alistair breathed. His voice, quiet as snowfall, cold as a winter grave. A wet, sickening crunch echoed through the hall. Every whimper died. Alistair crushed Cedric's windpipe, then tossed the body down the grand staircase. It landed heavy, a bloodied heap at the feet of trembling lords. Alistair turned back to Isabel. That killing fury in his silver gaze dissolved, instantly, completely, into something sacred. Something soft beyond measure. Alistair climbed the last step, and knelt. Right there, before every trembling pack of the northern valleys, he gathered her small scarred hand into his massive palm, pressed his forehead against her knuckles. The gesture was reverence, absolute, eternal. "My queen," Alistair murmured. His deep voice carried through the breathless silence of the hall. Every soul heard it. "The North is yours to command." The great hall shattered into sound. Not the savage, bloodthirsty roar of the Croft years. This was something older, a unified, bone-shaking howl of spiritual devotion that rattled the stone walls. Oakhaven's Lycans dropped to their knees first. The conquered rival packs followed, quickly, desperately, pledging their lives to the ancient king and his human mate. In the sun-drenched months that came after, the grim fortress of Oakhaven transformed beyond recognition. Silas Croft's reign of cruelty faded into a dark and distant nightmare. Justice replaced tyranny. Balance replaced chaos. Prosperity bloomed where only suffering had grown. Isabel, the same girl who had once scrubbed blood-stained floors on raw knees while they spat their insults, now walked those corridors with absolute authority. No one questioned her. She broke the seals on the forbidden archives herself, spent her days teaching the Pecks their stolen history, restoring the sacred, long-buried balance between Lycan and human. Lady Beatrice and every remaining Croft sycophant were stripped bare, their stolen wealth, their fine silks, gone. They were cast into the freezing, merciless wastelands without a single coin to their names. Forced to survive without the pack they had so thoroughly poisoned. Whispers said none of them lasted the first winter. As for Alistair and Isabel, their bond deepened with every rising sun. The Anima Nexum wove their souls into one brilliant, unbreakable tether. The true king's apocalyptic fury, forever guided and gentled by his queen's merciful heart. They ruled together from the high seats of Oakhaven, a living testament to one truth. Real power never came from the length of fangs or the depth of cruelty. It came from the ancient, unshakable magic of a promise honored. The outcast had become the savior, and the North would never dare mock a human again. From the blood-soaked stones of the Alpha Trial to the radiant throne of Oakhaven, Isabel proved that true strength has nothing to do with claws. It lives in the resilience of the spirit, in the power of a bloodline that refused to die. Those arrogant wolves believed they were crushing a fragile servant girl. Instead, they shattered the cage around their own ancient king, and crowned the very savior they had tried to destroy. The reign of Alistair and Isabel reshaped the Northern Territories forever, a reminder carved into history itself. The greatest secrets are always hidden in plain sight. If this tale of betrayal, ancient magic, and the love that defied centuries left its mark on you, hit that like button now. Share this story with anyone who craves a legend worth hearing. Subscribe and ring the bell so the next myth finds you the moment it arrives.